right, now we're going to take, in Honors Math 9, we're going to take our theorems and we're going to apply them to geometry. So some new theorems for us, or definitions. We have a midpoint, and a midpoint of a line segment is the point that divides a leg segment into two congruent segments. So in this diagram, segment AM is congruent to MB. An angle bisector, think of a bicycle having two tires. So an angle bisector is a ray that divides an angle into two congruent parts. So in this case, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. We also have the vertical angle theorem, where all vertical angles are congruent. So in this case, angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, and angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And then the last but not least, the new of the theorems, it's the linear pair theorem that says that angles, two angles have a sum of 180 degrees. So we know that the measure angle 1 plus measure angle 2 equals 180. Now we're going to take our theorems that we know and apply them. So if I told you that angle A and B are complementary, what that means is that they add up to 90. Then you can do substitution, combine like terms, and then subtract 5 from both sides, divide both sides by 2, and then x is equal to 42.5. Cool. Example number 2, this time we're saying that they're supplementary, and what it means to be supplementary is that they sum to 180 degrees. So again, this time we're going to deal with a quadratic. So again, I did a substitution. Noticing when I do substitution, I have parentheses around them. I'm going to combine like terms. Whenever you solve a quadratic, you set the equation equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 180 from both sides. And then I made my t-chart to help myself factor, but you could have also used quadratic formula or completing the square. And then I got 2 answers, because whenever you solve a quadratic, you'll always get 2 answers. I got x is equal to 30, and x is equal to negative 30, and x is equal to 5. And when we plug them in to double check, negative 30 does not work because this angle cannot be negative. So sometimes both of those answers will work, sometimes only one of them. You always have to check them out. Our third example is with a line segment. So we know that M is the midpoint of AB, so we have to solve for X. And what it means to be a midpoint is that it cuts the segment into two congruent parts. So x squared plus 10 is equal to 8x minus 2. Again, we're dealing with a quadratic, so I set the equation equal to 0. I then factored, and I got 2 solutions this time of 6 and 2. This time when I plug them in, they both work, so this time you have 2 solutions. When we deal with an angle bisector, we know that an angle bisector cuts an angle into 2 equal parts. So I set 2x plus 41 equals 5x plus 5. I brought all the variables to one side, all my constants to the other, and x is equal to 12 degrees. Number 5 is kind of hard to see because I have things overlapped, but let me just tell you, when you do these types of problems, you always want to label the diagram and then start with the same variable and see if you can come up with anything. Since we knew that angle 3 was 81 degrees, we could have solved for the measurements of all the other ones, so that helped a lot. You should get x is equal to 27 and y is equal to 33.